Don't look now, but bachelor's degrees are being made worthless by AI. Let's talk about that. So welcome to Dave is Not AI. I'm Dave, an AI expert and an AI skeptic. Let's get started. So artificial intelligence has not just transformed how we work, it has fundamentally changed what employers value, eroding the automatic premium that a bachelor's degree once guaranteed. So in a world where AI systems can write code, generate marketing content, analyze data, and even support complex decision-making, companies are starting to care less about where you went to school and more about what you can actually deliver. This shift is reshaping career paths, hiring strategies, and salary structures. So let's take a look and let's explore how AI is quietly but decisively devaluing our traditional four-year degrees that are out there now, perhaps one that you have, I certainly have it, and what it means to you and the workforce. So first, let's look at some data. The share of U.S. job postings requiring at least a bachelor's degree has fallen from roughly 20% before the pandemic to 17.6% in 2024, opening tens of thousands of more roles to workers without degrees and weakening the degree as a default hiring filter. And so we've been seeing this if you've been in the professional services area, for example, which is where I was focused on for many years, that no longer is a four-year degree always going to be a requirement for you to get an interview, for you to get considered for a job. In many cases, and also those who are, have a lot of experience, they look at what value you can bring to the company, what value you can bring to the firm, and not necessarily, what kind of credentials that you happen to have. And this is a long time coming. I think people have realized that a college degree or having a college degree doesn't guarantee a good hire. It doesn't necessarily become an attribute like it was many years ago. So let's look at some more data. In 2023, entry-level job postings dropped by 38%. An Economist cited, Economist, the magazine, provided analysis that for the first time in U.S. history, the unemployment rate for recent college graduates, 22 to 27, exceeded the national average, signaling that bachelor's degrees are no longer a guarantee of easy access to jobs. And so this is something we've been seeing as well. So if for whatever reason, the bachelor's degree has been devalued, and certainly in the minds of people out there that are hiring. And I think this is basically understanding the results. They just don't see the link between people holding a bachelor's degree and being successful at their positions. And in many cases, it's considered a stepping stone to get to a job, but it's not necessarily going to be a requirement anymore. So, and finally, a global skills first hiring review reports that AI-related skills now command about a 23% wage premium, surpassing the premium associated with simply holding a bachelor's degree, underscoring the market shift from credentials to capabilities. And this is basically something I think we all intuitively know. In other words, if you have a skill, whether it's cloud computing, AI, something like that, in other words, you can use the technology effectively, that's going to mean more to an employer than you having a credential. And in many cases, certifications, AI certifications, OpenAI certifications, Amazon certifications, what have you, are going to drive more interest in you because people are looking for those short-term tactical gains. In other words, they have a job that needs a particular skill set. Whether you have a bachelor's degree or not, I think basically has been pushed aside, and they're looking at your immediately inventory of skills. And if those are AI skills, you're going to be finding that a job is pretty easy to come around. So AI has shifted the value equation from credentials to capabilities, forcing employers to care less about degrees and more about what you can produce in real time. So again, it's going to be performance-based hiring that's out there now, skills-based hiring that's out there now. And it doesn't mean that, if you're getting a bachelor's degree, if you got a bachelor's degree, that's meaningless unto itself. It's just we don't value them as much as we did, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So AI-driven tools now perform many of the entry-level degree-requiring tasks, such as coding analysis, research, reducing the need for armies of junior employees with bachelor's degrees. And I covered this in my other channel, the Cloud Computing Insider, where it talked about the fact that ultimately the first couple of years of, say, a professional service career, working for some of the big consulting firms out there, is going to be things that are automated already. So the first things you would do initially as an entry-level employee are going to be tasks that many of these companies out there and firms out there have already automated, so they're not going to need you to do those things. So they're in essence eliminating, many of the starts and the certain basic skills that employees will get in working for some of these firms. And I'm not sure where we go with that, but I'm seeing reduction in entry-level hires just because of so much automation occurring, or has occurred already, with some of the AI tools and technologies that these firms employ. So as AI accelerates the skills acquisition through online platforms and adaptive learning, the long, expensive bachelor path looks increasingly insufficient and outdated. And this is a bit of a sad story, because many of these bachelor's degrees cost, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases. And in most of the cases, the students couldn't afford, the cash out of pocket. So they went and got these very huge student loans that they're going to be paying off for a long period of time. So it's kind of a double whammy there. In other words, not only you can't find a job, but you have to pay these huge amounts of loans, which is around the acquisition of a bachelor's degree that may not be helping you get a job, or may not be helping you with your career. So in other words, the ROI from those bachelor's degrees is going to be minimum these days. So employers are building hiring pipelines around demonstrable skills, portfolios, certifications, project outcomes, rather than defaulting to a bachelor's degree as the filter. So just restating what we talked about earlier, everything is going to be on performance-based merits. It's not going to be on credentials that you have, whether you have a PhD or a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. Some companies are going to weigh that as something that's going to be beneficial to you, and certainly is going to help your career somewhat. But many organizations that we're talking about here, and certainly with the advent of AI, are not putting a premium on those as much as they did in the past. So the wage premium historically associated with bachelor's degree is under pressure as AI enables non-degreed workers to perform at or above the level of traditional graduates. So AI becomes kind of a force multiplier for folks that may not have some of these formal training skills. In other words, if you learn how to write and speak in college, and problem solving, and understand how to get through certain situations, solve business issues, code, things like that, AI is able to assist you in understanding how to automate those things, so you're able to do as good, if not better, of a job as your peers who may have a college degree. And so no longer we're going to be relying on these basic skills that you have to be had in order for you to succeed at a career, in a career. I'm seeing this as well. In other words, I got out of college. It was obviously helpful to me in the fact I could learn to write and speak, and that's some of the things I obtained in college. I didn't get them in high school, and solve problems and things like that. And that allowed me to have an entry-level job in a particular company that had basic skills, or basic tasks that they wanted me to carry out. Now, AI is a force multiplier, and it's an equalizer in a sense. In other words, there's no reason that I couldn't have automated many of those things just as I got out of college, even if I didn't have a bachelor's degree, because that technology was there to write those reports, to do the data analysis, to do all the entry-level stuff that I think people really do in their first positions. And so that's going to be weird, here we are 30 years later. But as new college graduates enter the workforce, how they're going to react and respond to the fact that someone who just has a high school degree, or may not have any degree, is able to do their job as good, if not better than they are, because they're leveraging the same tools, in this case AI, which provides an equalizer with people who have lots of credentials and no credentials. So organizations are reallocating budgets from tuition reimbursement and degree-based training to AI enablement, continuous upskilling, and just-in-time learning ecosystems. And so, I have, I think, the best selling agentic AI course out there that's out on LinkedIn Learning. And one of the things I noticed about that, the majority of the people who are taking those courses are going to be people who are currently professionals in the industry right now. And the reason they're taking the course is because their employers are paying for them. And I think that's going to be the path forward. Some of the just-in-time learning, the video-on-demand learning, things like that, some of the mentoring and non-mentoring stuff, which I'm involved with, and how people want to consume information and consume skills are going to be the preferred direction. And so in many cases, it doesn't mean they're not going to get an education, but instead of going to a college or university to get a bachelor's degree or other degree, master's degree, PhDs, things like that, they're going to take a more tactical approach where they're kind of doing event-driven learning. In other words, they're becoming autodidacts unto themselves. They're reading books like the ones behind me. They're looking at videos or looking at YouTube. They're learning in other ways. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. Just because we didn't go to a formal college, and I did, and other people did, I did as well, that doesn't mean that people who are obtaining, very similar knowledge and skill-based knowledge aren't going to be as good, if not better than you. And I think people are going to prefer that style of learning, this just-in-time learning, the ability to understand the skills just when you need them, and the ability to kind of have this event-driven skills acquisition strategy. So in this AI-first economy, strategic thinking, domain expertise, and adaptable matter more than, checking a four-year degree. I think I'm going to go ahead and declare that now. Fundamentally devaluing degrees as a standalone asset. That doesn't mean I'm telling people not to go get a bachelor's degree. I just think that we have to come to an understanding that the value of that degree is not necessarily what it was 10 years ago or what it was 20 years ago. And I think that we're learning differently, we're trying to acquire skills differently, and we're going to have people who come from all different paths to get to the same sort of job types. And in many cases, the AI becomes a great equalizer because anything that we haven't learned as part of participating in a formal education, the AI systems can make up for it. I think that's the reality. It's going to be the equalizer moving forward. So the bottom line is that AI has broken the old contract that said get a bachelor's degree and you're set, replacing it with new realities where outcomes and adaptability matter far more than formal education. And I think that's really kind of the conclusion of the video here. So we're just, taking different attributes to assessing someone's ability to do a job. And I think that's perfectly fine for us to do that. And also I think it's going to be more efficient. People don't have to spend, $200,000 on a college degree and then spend 10, 15 years paying back the loan at a certain amount of interest rates and getting in trouble. And lots of people have gotten in trouble doing that. Also gotten very obscure degrees that they can't go out and make a living at. And this is going to avoid that. So in other words, if we're doing cheaper based, more efficient based skills acquisition processes, which is in essence what that is, the just-in-time learning, the video-on-demand learning, things like that, you're going to be better off and you're not going to have this huge debt. So we're moving into a skills-forward, AI-augmented workforce where your advantage is not the diploma on the wall, but how effectively you can leverage intelligent tools to create value. And I think that's another reality as well. In other words, it's not our ability to understand everything and be, just stuffed full of information and knowledge so we can do the job, but the ability to get at the tools and technologies that will provide the knowledge for you, and more importantly, provide the knowledge and then assemble that knowledge into some sort of an output that's going to be of value. In other words, creating reports, creating articles, research, all that kind of stuff can be done pretty well with many of the LLMs out there. And I'm sure if you're into that market, you've already tried that and have been blown away with the amount of value you can get out of those tools. It doesn't solve everything out there. It's not a creative thing. It doesn't, innovate. We do that as humans, but it can automate a lot of the drudgery that goes along with many of these jobs that are there. So that doesn't mean education is dead. It means static education is dead. And the winners will be those who treat learning as a continuous AI-enabled journey, not a four-year event, and who align their skills directly with real business impact. And I think we'll go ahead and leave it there. I think that at the end of the day, this is something that's happening. People, obviously, the universities and college would argue that, we're a value, or we're going to continue to be a value. People should come here to get their education, so to move forward and be more impactful within their careers. And many of that may be true. And certainly, some of the prestige colleges, universities, for example, going to some of the Ivy League schools out there, I always tell people who are able to get into those, do it, because they're going to provide you a network of very important and powerful people that you can use throughout your lifetime. I did not go to an Ivy League school. College to me was just a check mark to get to a first job. And I think many people look at it that way. And I just think the wisdom in many people moving down that path need to be reconsidered. Well, let me know what you think about this, whether you agree with me or not, as to whether college degrees are being devalued. And if so, where are we moving to? I'd be interested in your opinions as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also check out my other videos on this channel. Also check out my InfoWorld Cloud Computing blog, my 100+ LinkedIn Learning courses, and of course, my Generative AI Architecture course out on Go Cloud Careers. And finally, my latest books, Unlocking the Power of Cloud, back there, and An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. So until next week, stay very, very safe. The YouTube algorithm thinks that this video is the next one you should watch.